Alright, we're going. Let's pause this old Brody Stevens. Make sure we're still recording. Alright. Well, the devil almost snuck in. I have to say, I've had a complete change of heart. It's Wednesday, March 13th. It's 9 a.m. on the dot. Walking to work, of course. Where else would I be? Today is the penultimate day of my employment, if I'm using that word correctly. I think it means the day before the last. And, yesterday I was thinking a lot about biking to Lilburn on Friday, and ended up having a dream about biking. I think I mentioned all that. And so I had pretty much decided that as long as the weather was fine, which is not supposed to be, it's supposed to be like AM thunderstorms or something like that, that I would try to bike to Lilburn just to kind of see how that went. And I have since completely changed my mind. I'm gonna definitely walk to Lilburn on Friday, which is something that I wanted to do at least once before leaving for the trail. And it's 24 miles. I'm thinking I'll leave at 6 a.m., get there around 1. I'm gonna have my backpack, and I plan to camp out at my parents' cabin on Friday night in the yard, just to kind of make sure everything is tip-top magoo. But it's just funny how I was already thinking about giving in to the thing that I'd said I wanted to stay away from for as long as possible. And it just reminded me of this Alan Watts clip where Alan Watts was talking about, like, when the devil comes to tempt you. I got a dude over here in just a sec. When a devil comes to tempt you, another dude. Audio tour. Morning. When the devil comes to tempt you, the best thing you can do is just to sort of feign ignorance and stupidity and just tell him to come back tomorrow. And so, thankfully, I had a change of heart right at the crucial moment. All right, I'm on the belt line now. I can talk like a human being. So, I had a change of heart, no longer going to bike. I don't think that would have been a bad thing necessarily, but I do think that, if I can stay off the bike, start the Appalachian Trail, and put that distance of the actual Appalachian Trail between me and when I finally do get back on the bike. I'm about to sneeze. I think the pollen's coming out. If I can put that distance between me and the bike, all the better. I think, when I do end up getting back on the bike, I'm going to have to treat it very, very differently than I have over the past few years. And so, the longer I can stay off of it, I think the better the chance that when I get back on it, I can establish new habits that are healthier and not so obsessive, not so, consuming. So I think getting on Friday would have been a bit premature, even though my bike looks really good right now, hanging up on the hook where it is in my dining room area. It's been stripped down to its bare essentials. The frame looks good. I should stop. This is like a junkie talking about drugs. It doesn't help. So that's funny. I'm out here on the unfinished belt line, as I said. Ran into a guy last night, Eddie Donnelly, and he was out riding. Talked to him for a bit, told him about the trail, and he seemed to be very, I I don't know, touched by what I was saying I was going to do. I don't know, I felt like his affect changed at a certain point just because of the epicness of the task. And I told him he wanted to like have a going away party, which isn't my style. I don't like to, I really don't like that kind of attention, period. But I also don't ever want to count my chickens before they hatch. If I'm going to do anything, to celebrate anything, I want it to be on the other side. I'm a pretty strict dessert last kind of person. And so, I told him, we'll party when I get back, assuming all goes well. So, that was nice. I made an interesting meal last night. Ate some beef, which, I don't know, it was qualitatively different eating beef as opposed to like other meats and tofu and all that. Pollen. I don't often eat beef. I feel like beef is something that you really have to be moderate about, because I think it can be pretty bad for you. I know. Well, I don't know. I don't know about all those studies and everything about red meat and like colon cancer. There's probably other factors at play there. But anyway, when I was doing the flooring over the weekend, and I'd forgotten to mention this, but it was a fun part of the day. Erica's mom had packed a bunch of food for us to eat, and Erica's dad started cooking it sort of like midway through the day, and it was like these delicious Korean marinated short ribs, and I don't think I've ever had that before, but they were delicious. I really almost couldn't stop eating them. Had 2 plates, could have eaten more, but I knew I shouldn't because we still had a lot of work to do, and I didn't want to be so uncomfortably full that every time like I bent down, I felt like, I was going to pop or something. But in search of trying to replicate that, last night I had some beef, and I don't know, beef it made me feel really full, but it didn't make me feel uncomfortable. I felt just like very satiated. It made me think that like there's something qualitatively, nutritionally different between beef and chicken and turkey and all that stuff. I'm not exactly sure what it is. Maybe there's just more protein per pound or something like that, or different kind of complete protein or something like that. But I don't know. It felt noticeably different. Also, my sibling, she had bought me some, shall we say, grandpa for the trail, and I was breaking it up last night just to make it more manageable, and I decided to sample a bit just to see how it was. And I had like a small glass of wine, like a half cup, and a beer, so I was pretty loose and uninhibited. So I thought, yeah, sure, why not? Let's try this out. So smoked that and got really, really high, like surprisingly high. And it was really clear, what I would describe as definitely sativa dominant. And it was funny because like I think CBD and some things are used to treat like epilepsy and other like seizure-based illnesses, but this stuff had me like buzzing, like body-wise. I could kind of feel my hand, I felt like I was kind of shaking a little bit, like not actually shaking like when you're cold or anything, but just like there was some sort of like electricity buzzing throughout like my limbs. So that was a pretty crazy addition to the night that I hadn't necessarily intended upon. Definitely wouldn't have been able to function beyond doing things by myself. It definitely wouldn't have done well for me to be in a social situation and feel that way, or to be somewhere where I felt enclosed. But it was fine. I didn't freak out or anything like that. I was just like, wow, this is extremely potent, and I didn't even have that much. Props to Low for that. But I started listening to this book that Ben Chestnut suggested. Oh yeah, I met with Ben Chestnut yesterday. So many things I can talk about, and they come to mind so slowly. But yeah, I met with Ben Chestnut yesterday. We had a great little talk. He's always fun and easy to talk to. I was getting pretty nervous, like leading up to it, just because I was like, man, I don't know. I don't really know why I was getting nervous. I mean, aside from the obvious that he's like an extremely wealthy and important person, and I don't want to waste his time. But at the same time, I know he wouldn't ever want me to feel that way. So once I finally got into the office to talk to him, we talked about, everything that MailChimp has done for me, and I thanked him for that. Then we talked a little bit about books and biking and walking and the Appalachian Trail. He suggested this book called The Courage to be Disliked, and it sounded really interesting, and it sounded like something that would be good to, like, the content of it would be something good to have running in the background of my mind at the very least, especially as I get closer and closer to going onto the trail and embracing this big change. So I ordered it shortly after I got back to my desk, or at least I bought the audiobook version. Didn't really order anything. Started it last night after having the grandpa, and man, it was just hitting really hard, the actual content, excuse me, of the book. It's basically this dialogue between this young guy, who I guess is just like a kid or maybe a young adult, and this older, I guess he described himself as a philosopher. Was it? I guess so, yeah. A student of philosophy for sure. Man, apologies. I'm getting susceptible to all this emerging life. And so they're going back and forth. The young guy basically thinks that, like, things are static and deterministic and kind of negative. And there's a certain point in the book, very early on, where this character, the young guy, admits that he hates himself. And I really don't identify with pretty much all of what the young guy is saying, especially since he admitted so early on that he's, like, supremely dissatisfied with himself. But I get I want to call it a dialectic. I get the dialectic that the book is going for, and sort of the perspectives it's trying to examine and explore. And I definitely fall more on the side of the older man in terms of my own baseline philosophy. Maybe he said it was a philosopher, or is that what I said earlier? Doesn't matter. But still, it's interesting. It's based on Adlerian, like Adler. I don't remember his first name. His psychology, and apparently it was a popular book in Japan. But in any case, basically, the older man is saying that the past doesn't matter, cause and effect doesn't matter. You basically have, like, you have goals, and goals aren't dependent on the past to develop. And so there was this instance where the young guy was describing this time when, like, a waiter spilt a drink on his brand new jacket, and he got really upset and yelled at him for doing it. And the young guy was like, "You're telling me that the cause and effect there isn't really the way I'm seeing it?" And the old man was like, "Yeah, your goal was to be angry, and shouting was the means by which you achieved it." So a lot of, like, deep considerations like that in the book. It's been pretty interesting. I've only listened to the first hour, and it's only 6 hours long, so I'm sure there's a good chance I'll finish it by the end of the weekend, especially considering that the walk to Lilburn is going to be at least 7 hours long. So I'm enjoying that. It's an interesting book. Ben Chestnut, I'm curious when he read that book, or when he listened to it rather, how old he was, how recently it was. He was saying that it was one of the books that he wishes he had read when he was younger, and so I'm kind of curious what that means in terms of when he actually did read it. Because so far, I don't know, Ben's a smart guy, so maybe he's just being humble, but a lot of these concepts and everything are things that I would think that he was at least aware of. But then again, I guess I was a psychology major. He was more of like a graphic design or business or something like that. So perhaps this was his first introduction to Adler and his philosophies and stuff. I don't know. Apparently Ben reads a lot of books, and when I told him that his whole company and philosophy reminded me a lot of Henry Ford's, after I had listened to that My Life and Work book by Henry Ford, his autobiography, Ben wrote the name of the book down, so I guess there's a good chance he'll listen to or read it. So that's interesting if he does end up doing that, because I would be, I'd be curious. I don't think I'll ever get the answer, but it would be interesting to hear if he agreed with my assessment that he and Henry Ford are somewhat similar. I definitely caveated the book, with the acknowledgement that there's some problematic things about Henry Ford. Apparently he was a bit of an anti-Semite, which kind of does seem to be par for the course back then. I don't remember when he died. I think he died, well, I recall in the book, I think he provided vehicles for England in World War I, which would have been the early 1900s, but I think he died during World War II. So he would have been born in the 1800s, and who even knows what the political attitude or societal attitude towards everything was back then. It's really hard to imagine. It'd be so easy to be backwards without the the clarifying commentary of the internet. The internet's a pretty amazing thing. I really don't have to say much about that. It's self-evidently true. Anyone with access to it would be able to just intuitively know that. In fact, when I walked to Kroger last night to get the food that I was eating last night, last night, there were two young boys in the bathroom when I went there, and one of them was in the stall, and I think he was probably even younger than the one that was out by the sink, who I saw when I entered the bathroom. And the young boy in the stall was asking his, I presume, brother, like, how to say a certain word in Spanish. And the brother outside the stall was kind of annoyed, and he was like, come on, let's go. And the other brother was like, no, but how do you say whatever in Spanish? And the guy was like, I don't know. And then the younger brother was like, Google. So it's just interesting. Two boys who have grown up only knowing the internet, and just like, knowing, I mean, it's obvious that they would know that Google is the go-to for questions. But, when I was like 10 years old or younger, I didn't have access to the internet like that. I don't even think Google was a thing. It would be interesting to see when Google was formed. But I mean, if it was formed, like, I have an intuition that it was like 1997. So I would have been 7 years old. Morning. I did have discs for Encyclopedia Britannica. It's like a 6-disc set, and that did have internet connectivity abilities. But even back then, I mean, the size of the internet wasn't as large as it is now, and the idea of a static encyclopedia like that spread over 6 discs is kind of laughable, just considering how much more information we have access to now. Anyway, coming to the end of the Beltline now, and I've been getting into this artist recently called Kiefer. He's got a great series on YouTube. Maybe I'll link to it below. That kind of just shows him making all these songs, like the whole process at his house. It's fun to watch. And I've been listening to his album Happy Sad. And I think he's got a new album coming out in April. So I'm excited to gobble that up as soon as it comes out. So I'm gonna go back to Kiefer now so I can get to work on time. It's 9:20, so I'm pretty much where I need to be at this time. But Kiefer will help get me there. So for now, again, March 13th, 1 day left of work, 16-hour shifts left before I'm unemployed, and the real journey starts. So, yeah, talk to you tomorrow on my last day. Get the tissues ready. Bye for now.